Hello everyone, I wish you peace and happiness. Are you all healthy? Today, I will continue to tell you what happened after Huyen saw the carrying baby Micah. Huyen told it to go back and not to disturb the life of me and my daughter anymore. That morning in the small thatched house, Huyen woke up as the gentle dawn light seeped through the bamboo cracks. She gently turned over and looked to the side, seeing little Micah still sleeping soundly, her face peaceful like a small flower. Outside, the morning mist still lingered over the lush vegetable beds, and the small dog had woken up, quietly lying in front of the porch as if guarding the sleep of the mother and child. Huyen softly got out of bed, lit the fire, and the crackling of the wood sounded warm and comforting. The smell of smoke mingled with the scent of damp earth, creating an indescribably peaceful feeling. When Micah woke up, she ran over to hug her mother, her eyes still sleepy but shining with joy. The mother and daughter began a new day together, simple yet warm, in the small house and the lush garden, where all their love was contained. Huyen gently holds baby Micah in her arms, softly strokes her soft hair, and gently advises, and quote, "Later I will go to the field to pick scallions to sell. Here is milk, cookies, and bananas that I've prepared at home. When you're hungry, remember to eat them." End quote. She leans down to look directly into her child and Appo's eyes, her tone serious but still full of love. End quote. "Stay at home and play nicely. Do not leave the house and do not go with strangers, understood?" End quote. Micah nods softly, her small hands clutching her mother's neck as if she doesn't want to let go. Huyen smiles, gently kisses her forehead, then places her on the bamboo bed, reminding her once more before leaving the house. Her heart still bears a bit of worry, but she trusts that her child will be obedient and wait patiently for her return. Having spoken, Huyen bent down to gently nuzzle Micah and Appo's chubby cheeks and kissed her tenderly on the cheek. She stood up, carefully closed the door, and then wrapped the door handle tightly with a string as a habit whenever she went out. Only when everything was secure did she feel at ease. Before leaving, Huyen turned back to give one more reminder, her voice full of concern yet gentle. End quote. "Remember what I told you, stay inside the house, Don and Appo's. Open the door for anyone and Don and Appo's. Go anywhere." End quote. "Be good at home and wait for Mom to come back." Micah obediently nodded, standing inside and watching her mother's figure gradually disappear down the alley, the house becoming quiet again, with only the early sunlight filtering through the thatched roof and the faint chirping of birds outside in the garden. When my mother just left, the small house became quiet. Micah stood for a moment looking out the door, then turned inside, her eyes gradually shining with mischief. Remembering her mother and Appo's instructions, she didn't and Appo's go outside but stayed around the house. Suddenly Micah giggled, spread her tiny arms, and started singing and dancing alone. She spun on the ground, her steps clumsy but adorable, humming innocent songs. The morning sunlight filtered through the thatched roof, casting shadows that made her small figure dancing even more lively. The dog lying in the corner also lifted its head to look, as if quietly and quote, watching and quote, the girl and Appo's performance. In the simple house, Micah and Appo's laughter and dance made the space warm and joyful, even though she was alone there. Arriving at the onion field, Huyen placed the bamboo basket down on the edge of the land, quickly wiped the sweat from her forehead, and began to bend down to pick onions. The lush onion rows stretched out before her, with leaves still covered in early dew. Her hands skillfully sifted through the soft soil, pulling up each bunch of onions, shaking off the dirt, and gathering them in one spot. The gentle morning breeze blew softly, carrying the scent of earth and the pungent aroma of onions. Huyen and Appo's figure was bent over in the field, diligent and silent, each movement of her hands embodying her effort for life and for little Micah waiting for her to return. At home, little Micah ran quickly to the corner of the house, picked a small beautiful flower, and skillfully clipped it onto her soft hair. She looked at her reflection in a water basin, smiling happily like a little princess. After finishing remembering her mother and Apo's instructions, Micah took out a cake and a milk box, sat properly on the bamboo bed, and started eating. She ate while swinging her legs, her eyes sparkling with joy. Micah finished the small cake, lightly brushed off the crumbs from her hands, and then picked up the milk box to drink. She sipped each delicious gulp, her eyes shining with delight. While eating and drinking, Micah hummed innocent songs, her lilting voice echoing throughout the small house. Occasionally, she turned to the dog lying beside her, smiled brightly, and whispered as if chatting, "Puppy, are you eating well?" The dog gently wagged its tail, looked up at Micah as if understanding, making her giggle. The quiet space suddenly became lively with her singing and clear laughter, making the small house warmer and more lively. In the lush green field, Huyen diligently bends down to pick each bunch of onions. Wearing a conical hat to shield from the sun, she focuses her hands, skillfully loosening the soil and carefully pulling up the onions still covered in moist dirt. Nearby, bundles of onions are neatly arranged in bunches, tidy and fresh. The morning sunlight stretches across the field, highlighting Huyen and Apo's small but hard-working figure. Sweat beads on her forehead, but she keeps working without stopping, because in her heart she is always thinking of Micah waiting at home for her mother. After harvesting the scallions, Huyen carefully gathered each bunch and placed them into a bamboo basket. She bent down, exerted effort to lift the basket onto her shoulder, walking slowly but steadily. The rows of scallions behind her remained lush and green, while ahead was a dirt road leading to the market. Huyen silently walked across the field, her feet leaving marks on the dry ground, the basket on her shoulder filled with the fruits of a hard morning. The gentle breeze from the fields made her allée flutter, carrying the familiar scent of the garden. That small figure moved through the vast space, both simple and resilient, all for the hope of selling her bunch of scallions to support her and her child in Apo's life. Reaching the town, Huyen found a small corner on the sidewalk and gently placed the basket down. She took out the cloth bag she brought, spread it neatly on the ground, and began arranging the bunches of scallions. The ivory-white bulbs and lush green leaves were tidied up neatly, aligned straight to look fresh and attractive. Occasionally, Huyen brushed off the remaining dirt from the bulbs, then sat quietly beside them. At home, after eating cake and drinking milk, little Micah climbed onto the bamboo bed and lay down to rest for a while. The gentle sunlight filtering through the thatched roof made the space warm and peaceful, causing her to doze off as if she wanted to sleep. But after a short while, Micah jumped up, her eyes shining with energy again. Remembering when Mom used to exercise, she mimicked standing in the middle of the house, stretching her arms out, and then doing some exercises. Micah turned around, bent down, then stood up again, her small legs bouncing rhythmically. While exercising, she giggled, and the small house was filled with joyful sounds. Huyen sat quietly beside the stall, her eyes following the flow of people passing by on the busy street. The passers-by hurried back and forth, occasionally stopping to look, then walking away, causing her to feel a slight worry. But eventually, someone stopped in front of the lush bunches of green onions. Huyen quickly smiled, gently introducing herself, her hands skillfully selecting the freshest bunches to offer to the customer. When the person nodded to buy, Huyen and Apo's eyes suddenly brightened, a simple joy clearly visible on her face. For her, each bunch of onions sold was not just money, but also hope for a fuller day to soon return to Micah. Micah hurriedly went out to the front door, her small feet slowly stepping on the familiar ground. She bent down to carry the basket of vegetables that her mother had prepared, then sat neatly in front of the porch. Remembering her mother and Apo's usual actions, Micah imitated picking each stalk of vegetables, her tiny, clumsy hands but very focused. Occasionally she paused, looked at them, then giggled because she thought she looked and quote, like Mom and quote. The dog lying beside her also quietly watched, as if keeping her company. The last bunches of green onions were finally sold. Huyen let out a relieved sigh, a look of joy clearly visible on her face after a hard morning. She quickly gathered the cardboard, neatly folded the bamboo carrier, and stood up to pack her belongings. The crowd outside the street was still bustling, but in Huyen and Apo's heart she was only thinking about Micah at home. She hurriedly walked faster, her legs feeling lighter, hoping to return soon to her familiar small house. In her mind, the image of well-behaved little Micah waiting for her made all her fatigue seem to disappear. As soon as she got home, Huyen hadn't Apo's. She even had time to put down the baby carrier when Micah saw her mother. She cheered happily, hurriedly ran out, her small legs trotting eagerly. Mom and Apo's back. Her voice rang out clearly. Micah rushed into her arms, her face glowing, her eyes sparkling with longing. Huyen bent down to hold her child, gently stroked her hair, smiled softly, then carried her inside, carefully placed the baby carrier down, and tidied up the belongings in their familiar corner. After finishing, she stepped out onto the porch, bent down to pet the dog lying on the ground, her hand stroking its soft fur. Huyen smiled gently and asked, "Are you good at home?" The dog wagged its tail slightly, lifting its head to look at her as if wanting to reply. Nearby, Micah also giggled, holding onto her mother and Apo's leg, filling the small space with warmth and affection after a long day apart. Huyen and her mother went to the small ditch in front of the house together. Huyen bent down to scoop water with a bucket, while Micah stood beside her, both hands holding a small scoop to help her mother. After filling the bucket with water, the mother and daughter took it to the garden and gently watered the lush green vegetable beds. The water soaked into the soil, making the leaves of the vegetables look more vibrant. Micah worked and smiled, occasionally glancing at her mother with delight. Huyen looked at her child with a gentle and warm expression. Outside the gate, the sound of motorbikes stopping shattered the tranquility of the afternoon. Anda parked his bike, carrying 2 gift bags in both hands, and as he stepped in he called out loudly, "Huyen oi!" His familiar voice made the space seem more lively. Huyen suddenly froze upon hearing the call outside the gate. Memories of yesterday suddenly flooded back, causing her heart to tighten and worry to appear clearly on her face. Without much thought, she quickly put down the water scoop she was using, tightly embraced baby Micah, and hurried to the back of the house. Her steps were hurried, her breath short, and she just wanted to find a secluded place to hide. Micah, still unaware of what was happening, only knew to cling to her mother and Apo's neck, her eyes wide with confusion. In front was the quiet backyard, but outside the calling continued, making the atmosphere tense and filled with unease. He stepped into the house, still holding 2 gift bags in his hands, calling out loudly, "Huyen! Micah!" But only silence responded. The small house was quiet, the door open, the furniture still there, but there was no sign of the mother and child anywhere. He paused, looking around from the bamboo bed to the corner of the kitchen, then stepped out onto the porch to look into the garden. His calls echoed a few more times, but still no one answered. At the back of the house, Huyen was still sitting close to the bamboo wall, holding Micah tightly in her arms. She gently covered the child in Apo's mouth with her hand, afraid she might accidentally speak out. Huyen and Apo's breathing was rapid, and her worried eyes looked ahead, where the calling voice still echoed. Not seeing the mother and child inside the house, he stepped outside, heading toward the small ditch in front of the house. The still water flowed quietly, reflecting the fading evening light. He stopped, looked around, and then called out louder, "Huyen! Micah!" The call echoed through the quiet space, but no one responded. He frowned slightly, a feeling of worry rising in his heart. He turned back into the house, pulled the wooden chair closer, and sat down next to the small dog lying on the ground. He gently placed the 2 gift bags aside and reached out to softly stroke its head. The dog looked up, wagging its tail softly as if recognizing a familiar person. He sighed, with a hint of contemplation in his eyes, his hand still gently patting the dog as if seeking comfort. The house was strangely quiet, only the soft breathing and faint tail wagging could be heard. He looked around once more, his heart full of confusion, unable to understand why Huyen and Apos, mother and daughter, were avoiding him like that. Huyen tightly hugs baby Micah, nestling against the corner of the house, her back leaning against the bamboo wall as if trying to hide from all eyes. She gently tilts her head, secretly observing the yard where Anda is sitting next to the small dog. Huyen and Apos' eyes are filled with worry and caution, her hand still holding the child tightly as if releasing him would make everything unsafe. Micah snuggles in her mother and Apos' arms, silently watching ahead with wide eyes but not daring to speak. The atmosphere becomes tense. Only the soft rustling of the wind through the branches and faint sounds outside the yard can be heard. Huyen holds her breath, quietly watching every movement of Anda, wanting to step out but also afraid of something unspoken. After a moment, De gently stood up, lightly patting the dog and Apos' head as a familiar greeting. The dog looked up, wagging its tail affectionately, while he turned and walked out the gate. His figure gradually disappeared behind the fence, leaving the yard as quiet as before. Seeing Da and Apos' figure approaching the gate, Huyen tightly embraced Micah and cautiously stepped outside to confirm. She looked in that direction, still feeling anxious. Suddenly, Da seemed to sense something, turned around and looked toward the house. In a brief moment, he caught a glimpse of the shadows of the mother and child behind the bamboo wall. Huyen was startled, quickly hugging her child and pressing close, not daring to move. Her heart was pounding rapidly, her breath faint and cautious as if afraid of being discovered. Anda stood still for a moment, a hint of doubt in his eyes, then gently shook his head, thinking that Huyen was probably still angry with him about yesterday. After that, he turned his back and walked away, leaving the path in front of the house. Only when his figure was completely out of sight did Huyen dare to breathe softly, holding Micah more tightly, her heart still filled with an indescribable worry. Huyen carried baby Micah into the house. As she stepped inside, her eyes suddenly stopped at two gift bags placed beside the chair. She was slightly surprised, put the child down, and slowly opened them to see. Inside were all kinds of candies, snacks, and small cute toys. Micah saw this and cheered happily, her eyes shining brightly, quickly running over to pick up each item to look at. Huyen sat quietly for a moment, looked at the gifts, then sighed softly, a wave of indescribable emotion rising in her heart. She understood that Anda had brought all these things for her child. Micah hugged the toy to her chest, smiling happily, while Huyen gently stroked her head, her eyes softening. In the small house, the child and Apos' joy intertwined with the mother and Apos' quietness, creating a moment that was both warm and tinged with reflection. The next morning in the peaceful small house, as little Micah just turned over and woke up, rubbing her sleepy eyes, Huyen had already taken the small dog outside. She bent down, gently guiding it to walk step by step on the wheelchair, softly calling and soothing it as she went. The dog was confused but still tried to follow, making Huyen smile gently. After a while she went back inside, took a bowl of rice, and placed it in front of the porch for the dog to eat. While it ate happily, Huyen sat beside, gently stroking its head, with a kind and peaceful look. The morning sunlight shone down on the small yard, making everything warm and opening a new day that was simple but full of love in the house of mother and child. Huyen carried baby Micah on her back, with the familiar carrier behind her that had accompanied her through many difficult days. She walked slowly along the small village road, with rows of rustling bamboo on both sides. Micah rested her head on her mother and Apos' back, her curious eyes observing everything around her. Huyen passed by simple houses, occasionally meeting a few acquaintances. She just nodded politely and continued walking. The road leading to the neighboring village was familiar but still long, each step carrying the diligence of a mother. She went there to buy eggs to sell at the market to earn a living for the two of them. Under the quiet canopy of the forest, Huyen bent down to pick up each egg hidden among the dry leaves. She carefully brushed off the dirt and placed them into the bamboo basket beside her. Next to her mother, little Micah also crouched down, mimicking her, her tiny hands delicately holding each egg as if it were a precious item. Occasionally, she giggled softly when she found an egg hidden under a tree root. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a warm and peaceful glow over the scene. Huyen worked while keeping an eye on her child, softly reminding her and "Be careful not to break them," end quote. Micah obediently nodded and continued collecting eggs very slowly. In the tranquil space of the forest, mother and child worked together, each simple action filled with closeness and love. Huyen carefully arranged each egg into the bamboo cage, her hands gentle as if afraid of breaking them. She placed the eggs neatly in layers, making sure they didn't touch each other, then skillfully picked up some dry leaves around to line the top and insert between the eggs. The soft leaves help keep the eggs secure and prevent them from shaking during transport. Nearby, Micah watched her mother work intently, occasionally adding a few small leaves, her eyes shining with delight. After collecting the eggs, Huyen and her mother carried the bamboo cage full of eggs towards the farm owner and Apo's house. Huyen walked slowly, holding the cage firmly, while Micah trotted beside her, occasionally reaching out to help her mother. When they arrived, Huyen carefully placed the cage down, paid the money, and politely greeted. The farm owner smiled warmly at the mother and daughter. After finishing, Huyen lifted the cage again, thanked her, and took Micah away. On the small path leaving the farm, the mother and daughter walked together, carrying the eggs and the simple joy of a peaceful morning. Huyen was holding baby Micah in her arms, with a bamboo crib full of eggs securely tied behind her. After walking for a while, Micah gradually fell asleep in her mother and Apo's embrace, her tiny face peaceful, breathing steadily. Seeing that her child was deeply asleep, Huyen gently approached a shady tree and stopped to rest. She stood under the tree, still holding her child very softly, afraid of waking her. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, bringing a touch of coolness in the midday heat. Huyen looked down at her child with a gentle gaze, softly stroking her soft hair. Although there was the burden of the egg crib behind her, in that moment everything seemed lighter, leaving only the peace of holding her child close. Arriving at the market, Huyen gently sat baby Micah down beside her, carefully adjusting her position to make her comfortable. She took out the cloth bag she brought, neatly spread it on the ground, and began stacking the eggs one by one. Her hands carefully placed each egg in a straight line, avoiding collisions to prevent cracking. Micah sat nearby, her eyes still sleepy but still watching her mother work attentively. Occasionally, she reached out lightly to touch the basket of eggs and smiled. After waiting for a while in the busy marketplace, finally a customer stopped in front of Huyen and Apo's stall. She quickly looked up, her eyes shining with hope, then gently smiled and greeted him. Huyen and Apo's hands skillfully selected the best eggs, carefully showing them to the customer. When the customer nodded to buy, Huyen let out a soft sigh of relief, a smile of happiness clearly on her face. To her, it was not just a few small coins, but also the result of a hard morning for both mother and daughter. The surrounding noise remained, but inside Huyen, she felt warmer and more relieved than ever. Micah sat quietly beside me, playing alone to let me focus on selling eggs. She took out small toys she brought and arranged them in front of her, sometimes stacking them, sometimes whispering as if playing with a friend. Occasionally, Micah looked up at her mother, and when she saw her mother busy with customers, she would lower her head and continue playing without bothering. Huyen looked at her child with a gentle and reassured expression, then continued stacking eggs and selling her goods. Finally, all the eggs were sold out. Huyen looked at the empty basket, sighed with relief, and a smile appeared on her face after a hard day of selling. She quickly packed up the mat, neatly folded the bamboo cage, and tied it securely behind her back. Micah saw her mother getting ready to leave and happily stood up, trotting over. Huyen bent down to lift her child, smiling gently, and then mother and child left the market together. On the way home, Huyen and Appo's steps felt lighter because she knew today had been a fulfilling day, and ahead was the warm little house waiting for the two of them to return. Upon arriving home, Huyen gently took down the bamboo cage behind her, placing it neatly in a familiar corner. She reached up to tie her slightly messy hair after a long day, then opened the cage to check. Inside, there were still a few eggs she had saved earlier. Huyen smiled softly, took out those eggs, planning to keep them for cooking a meal for herself and her child. Micah sat beside her, watching with a small gleam of joy in her eyes. In the simple house, just a few eggs were enough to make a warm meal, embodying both the thriftiness and love that a mother has for her child. Huyen stepped closer to the small dog, bent down to gently stroke its head, then softly held its front paws, smiling as she asked, "Are you good at home?" Her voice was gentle, as if talking to a close friend. The dog wagged its tail excitedly, its eyes shining as if understanding its owner's words. Nearby, little Micah stood watching, giggling with delight. She also bent down to pet the dog, imitating her mother and asking in a childish voice. Huyen took out the rice cooker, carefully measured each bowl of white rice, then called Micah to go to the garden to rinse the rice. Mother and daughter sat in the corner of the garden. Huyen gently stirred the water, while Micah's small hand helped, making the water cloudy, then giggled. After rinsing the rice, Huyen poured out the water, took the pot into the kitchen. She bent down to tend the fire, and the dry sticks started crackling as thin smoke rose up. When the stove was glowing red, Huyen placed the rice pot on and adjusted it to be straight. Micah sat beside her, watching her mother with focused eyes. After finishing in the kitchen, Huyen and her daughter Micah went to the garden to pick water spinach. The lush green rows of vegetables stretched under the gentle evening light. Huyen bent down, skillfully plucking each tender stalk, while Micah stood beside her, mimicking her mother by carefully picking small bunches of greens. Occasionally, Micah held up her harvest to show her mother, her face beaming with pride for doing a good job. Huyen smiled warmly, her eyes full of love, gently reminding her child as she worked. In the peaceful space of the small garden, Micah and Appo's laughter blended with the rustling of the leafy greens, creating a simple yet warm scene of mother and daughter. Huyen carried the basket of water spinach to the water corner, carefully washing each bunch to remove dirt. The cool water flowed over the green stems, making them look fresher. She gently picked out the wilted leaves and neatly placed the cleaned greens into the basket. After washing, Huyen took the vegetables into the kitchen, placed the pot of water on the burning stove. When the water boiled, she added the vegetables and gently stirred with chopsticks to cook evenly. Steam rose thickly, carrying a mild, fragrant aroma. Micah stood beside her, watching her mother cook, her eyes focused and full of delight. After boiling the vegetables, Huyen took them out to drain and then started frying eggs. She cracked each egg into a bowl, added a little fish sauce, and mixed well before pouring into a hot pan, with sizzling sounds filling the air and a fragrant aroma. The smell of fried eggs spread throughout the small kitchen, making Micah stand nearby and swallow her saliva in delight. Huyen skillfully flipped each golden, evenly cooked piece of egg and then placed them on a plate. Everything was ready. She arranged a simple meal with boiled morning glory and fried eggs. Then mother and daughter carried it together and placed it on the bamboo bed. Micah sat upright, her eyes full of excitement, while Huyen smiled kindly. Huyen gently picked up pieces of egg and vegetables for Micah, caring and reminding her to eat slowly. Micah obediently ate a few bites, but then her eyes began to close and she whispered, "Mommy, I and Appo's am sleepy." Huyen softly smiled, put down her chopsticks, and pulled her daughter onto her lap. Micah rested her head on her mother and Appo's chest, her arms hugging her mother and Appo's shirt, and after a moment she fell asleep. Huyen gently laid her daughter down on the bamboo bed and adjusted the pillow for her. The sound of the motorbike stopping outside the gate disturbed the quiet atmosphere. Anda got off, carrying a large water jar on his shoulder, walking slightly tilted due to its weight but still steady. Anda stood by the porch, quietly looking inside, and saw Huyen sitting and eating rice next to Micah, who was sleeping soundly. He was about to turn away when suddenly he took a step back, stepping on a piece of plastic shell that made a loud crunching sound in the silent space. Hearing a noise, Huyen was startled, quickly set down her bowl, and ran outside to see what was happening. At the same time, Da was panic-stricken, swiftly placed the water jar on the ground, and hurriedly sneaked to the back corner of the house, hiding in a concealed spot. Huyen ran out to the yard, her eyes scanning around and only seeing a barrel quietly placed in the middle of an empty space. There was no one around, nor any sign of the person who brought it there. Huyen was a bit surprised and approached the barrel, observing it more closely. A strange feeling arose in her heart. Who could have brought this here? Feeling uneasy, she decided to go around outside to find the person who left it. Huyen quickly walked to the side of the house, looking around the bushes and the small path leading to the garden as she went. Just then, behind the house, Anda was quietly hiding behind the trees, holding his breath to avoid making any noise. He pressed himself against the bamboo wall, his eyes following Huyen as she searched around the yard, unaware that he was very close. After searching around the yard and the back of the house without seeing anyone, Huyen sighed softly, her eyes showing a hint of concern. The large basin placed in the middle of the yard seemed as if someone had just left it there, silent and heavy. She looked at it for a moment before deciding not to wait any longer. Huyen bent down, using all her strength to lift the basin, and slowly carried it into the house. The dirt road in front of the porch was still slightly damp, and each of her steps left gentle marks. The wind rustled through the bamboo trees, but no one appeared around. Huyen placed the basin in the corner of the house, then stood quietly for a moment before taking a chair to sit in front of the basin. Seeing Huyen go inside the house, Mr. Da quietly circled around to the side of the house. He stood behind the bamboo partition, his eyes gently watching every gesture of the mother and daughter. Inside the small house, the sounds of Huyen and Micah and Appo's laughter and conversation echoed warmly, making Mr. Da feel a sudden sense of confusion. He didn't and Appo's dare to step in, only standing there silently observing, as if afraid to break that rare peaceful moment. A gentle breeze blew through, rustling the leaves in front of the porch, while Mr. Da remained still, his gaze both distant and full of thought. Da stood quietly for a moment longer, his eyes still watching Huyen and her mother through the gap in the bamboo wall. He sighed softly, as if he had made a decision. He took slow steps backward, careful not to make any noise. Then he turned and left the corner of the house, walking out onto the small path leading to the gate. His figure gradually disappeared behind the trees, leaving only the rustling wind as a farewell. In his heart, he felt a twinge of longing, but he knew he should leave to keep Huyen and her mother peaceful in that simple moment. It was late afternoon, and the faint sunlight gradually covered the small yard in front of the house. Huyen was still sitting quietly beside the old well, her hands gently resting on the edge as if holding on to something very distant. Her gaze lowered, full of contemplation, looking into the empty space in front of her without saying a word. The wind blew, causing her dress to flutter slightly, but Huyen remained still, as if caught up in her own thoughts. Micah was already asleep inside the house, and outside, only the rustling of leaves and the silence prevailed. By that old well, Huyen sat there for a long time, reflecting on the past days, on the hardships that had yet to be named, and on a tomorrow still distant but never losing hope. If everyone loves Huyen and Micah and Appo's mother and daughter, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications, and leave a word of encouragement for the two of them to see the next developments. Every follow and every loving comment from everyone will be a source of comfort and strength to help Huyen get through the difficult days. Thank you all very much.